Hello, I'm Colonel Philip Blair, MD, and I'm a family practitioner and a cannabinoid specialist. I want to talk to you about traumatic brain injury and caryophyllene in particular. So traumatic brain injury runs a spectrum, so that you certainly can get injured with a direct trauma, and as in an automobile accident or a fall. But there are other types of injuries that can occur on a more subtle level: concussions, blast injuries, and one of the manifestations of repeated concussions can be chronic traumatic encephalitis. So this is a huge burden of disease on the population and the public, where there are over 5 million Americans who are afflicted with this type of problem, and it can be acute and it can be chronic as well. The $60 billion in expenses are related to it, and $150,000 per episode. It's the main cause of death for 15 to 44-year-old individuals. And the pathways of disease are complicated. Now, there's a focal damage that's pretty obvious to what you can see on an examination, but there are diffuse, subtle injuries that are not easily diagnosed. They're microvascular, they're ischemic, they're axonal. And so when the nerve, the axon of the nerve is the one that connects different nerves together. They go from one nerve to another and to stimulate other receptors. And those axonal extensions are damaged in the process of a traumatic brain injury. So the pathways of disease I want to talk about a little bit. So there are microtubules in the axon that transport different chemicals and neurotransmitters. There's permeability issues in around the axon from the vasculature. There's transport issues. There are mitochondrial, the energy of the axon and of the neural cell. And the microglia, the immune cells of the body, are contained, get their energy from the mitochondrial function, and this can be damaged in this possibility of a traumatic brain injury. And there's tau protein. These are misfolded proteins that can cause inflammation and oxidative stress within the body. And so the main pathways here, we're focusing on the glial cells, and this is the immune function of the brain, and it's also vascular, so that they protect the vascular surfaces. They provide for the infiltration of different inflammatory cells, and they protect the body from the permeability issues that happen with a traumatic injury. So they're protecting, these particular types of cells protect the vascular capillaries from leaking and from the invasion from the cells from the inflammatory cells. And there's excitotoxicity, and this has to do with the neurotransmitters that can be very irritating to the body, and irritate the function and cause actually misfiring and damage to the neuronal cells. And the microglial cells, which are actually inflammatory cells and produce inflammatory cytokines within the body and the brain. So beta-caryophyllene and cannabidiol for immune modulation of the body. And I use this image as a diabetic vascular image because it gives a window to the brain and the vasculature of the brain. Now, the beta-caryophyllene and cannabidiol work together, and they can work independently to reduce macrophage infiltration. They'll reduce the amount of cytokine, or these inflammatory substances in the brain. They'll protect the glutamine metabolism. So the glutamine is that excitatory molecule that is a neurotransmitter that can cause actual damage to neurons if it's in excess. And the modulation of this endocannabinoid system actually reduces that danger of glutamine metabolic inflammation and irritation. It blocks the vascular growth factor, and this is a problem with respect to the excessive growth of vascular tissues and inflammation. And it strengthens endothelial cell function and prevents a leaking of these membranes. And the leaking has a lot to do with inflammatory changes in the brain. Specifically, beta-caryophyllene and cannabidiol work on the brain as a neuroprotective and a neuroplasticity modulator. And neuroplasticity has to do with forming new neuron connections and actually forming new neurons from stem cells. It modulates the cytokines and the neurotransmitters. It regulates the microglia and the astroglial cells that control for and support the neurons. It restores the blood-brain barrier and the permeability, that's the impermeability that needs to be there to protect it from the inflammatory substances up from the rest of the body. And it modulates the mitochondrial energy. And this is so important because you need that energy in the brain to have it function properly and to avoid different chronic types of stresses. And it reduces oxidative stress both in the mitochondria and in the neurons of the cell. So what is beta-caryophyllene? Well, it's actually an essential oil. It's common in many species and many spices, and it alleviates pain, inflammation, anxiety, and many metabolic disorders. It's found in thousands of plants, and there are over 3,000 published articles about beta-caryophyllene and its benefit on the body. The ones that I have shown here are from cloves and hops. And so you see it's a common entity in many different foods, and it's a great, great nutritional value. It's FDA approved. So it's a food flavoring, and it's absolutely approved, and it's safe. Very, very safe in the body. In fact, it's absolutely non-toxic, and it causes no significant changes and no interactions with other substances in the body. So that makes it particularly safe, and it's safe in children and safe in pets. Now, these are a few of the connections that both beta-caryophyllene and CBD work on. It encompasses much more than the endocannabinoid system. It encompasses all systems of the body, all the 11 systems that we deal with. And there are over 100 connections to the body, but they're a little bit different between CBD and BCP. And one of the main factors is that BCP, beta-caryophyllene, actually targets the CB2 receptor very effectively, calming down inflammatory cells that are prolific in a traumatic brain injury. Now, I've compared CBD to caryophyllene here, where CBD is really very effective for epilepsy, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, brain injury, wound healing, and cancer. It has a number of ill side effects that can be negative. And there's many people who cannot use cannabidiol because it comes from hemp, and because of legal or constraint issues about using a cannabinoid-derived substance. Now, whereas caryophyllene has particularly strength in immunologic and metabolic pathways. It's particularly effective for neuropathy, for vision, for depression, gut issues, and addiction. And it has no significant negative types of problems associated with it. So if you're looking at these particular benefits very effectively, then what I've outlined here, the number of different possibilities and the number of different research studies that have been done on this substance. So the range is quite extraordinary, but I can only go through a few of them right now. And I want to focus on the anti-inflammatory effects right away. So caryophyllene attaches itself to the CB2 receptor, and this receptor is a key factor for inflammation. It is on every one of the immune cells. It turns off inflammation and turns off these inflammatory parameters. It's effective for heart disease. It's effective for brain injury and brain trauma and brain disease. It's effective for gut problems, and it's respiratory. It has a respiratory effect as well. It also includes vascular inflammation. So we're talking atherosclerosis and leaking membranes, whether that's in the gut or the brain. So the particular way that this works is it doesn't turn off the immune system. It shifts the immune system to a healing phase. So that there's when an inflammatory signal goes on in the body, it turns on the activated microglia of the brain, and that becomes inflammatory. It's releasing cytokines. It's causing increased permeability in the brain tissues. But beta-caryophyllene shifts that to an M2 type of healing microglia that calms all this inflammation. It reduces the biomarkers. It reduces the macrocytic invasion, the immune cell invasion, and it improves the overall functioning of the brain in preventing inflammation. But it also works on neuropathic pain. For a long time, CB2 receptor was considered just as an immune modulator. But we know now that it affects the neuron channels, particularly ion channels of pain. And so it's very, very effective in neuropathic types of conditions. And what I see is that by beta-caryophyllene, by activating the CB2 receptors, it's calming down the microglia and the astrocytes, and that controls much of the neuropathic pain. It's anti-neuroinflammatory, so it's protecting the brain from these inflammatory substances. And it's actually stimulating brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this improves the mood and improves memory deficits. And it actually is effective for anti-Alzheimer's effects by blocking amyloid beta aggregation and amyloid beta complications from problems with potential for Alzheimer's disease. These are pieces of evidence about the beta-caryophyllene and its impact on the inflammatory pathways. And I'll use that as a reference that you can use for relating to this substance. Now, beta-caryophyllene effects on traumatic brain injury and chronic traumatic encephalitis are very, very precise. They prevent brain damage. They prevent oxidative stress. They inhibit these cytokines and these inflammatory factors that actually go down to the level of the DNA molecule. It shifts the microglia to the M2 healing type, and it induces astrocyte and neurons to proliferate and survive in traumatic situations and vascular limitations. It increases the neuronal intracellular autophagy. And autophagy is like getting rid of the garbage inside the cell. You get misfolded proteins that have to be removed, and this process is encouraged. And so it's been related to improved lifespan in animals, and I think in a number of different experiments that have been done. And it decreases the blood-brain permeability. That leaky membrane that goes around with the brain is so important in so many conditions. Now, this is a study that showed the combined effect of cannabidiol and caryophyllene alone and in combination. And you see on the far right, you see the best result of the combined effects in this ischemic and blood-limiting experiment, where the combined effect was absolutely the best effect. So there's a synergy that occurs that makes this highly effective, but you can't always use cannabidiol in these situations because of limitations for legal or professional use. Now, I want to point out depression. Depression also has to do with inflammation. And you can mitigate the inflammation of the brain, and you can relieve depression almost immediately with beta-caryophyllene. I've seen this happen a dozen times where people have a relief of depression quickly and effectively within about 10 minutes of use of this product. And sleep is so important for our major functioning, but it also encourages It also is related to the blood-brain barrier leakage. And so if we don't get a proper sleep, if we're not getting the balance of rest, then we're going to have leaky membranes. And beta-caryophyllene absolutely upregulates the receptors and the neurotransmitters that are involved with this process and restores a normal sleep. And it decreases the leakage and the inflammation that occurs with loss of sleep, and improves the quality and duration of sleep. So I want to get through a summary here of this product. This is a liposomal beta-caryophyllene that I've developed. It has been widely used in the last year. I've treated over 1,000 patients with it, and I found extraordinary results with it. It is a natural herbal food substance. You can't get better than this. It's a broad spectrum cannabinoid, so it doesn't come from cannabis, but it has all of the factors that improve the endocannabinoid system, which is so key and important in so many diseases. It's FDA approved and accepted. It's synergistic with CBD, and it acts as an alternative to a cannabis product. It has established effective liposomal format that is very, very bioavailable for individuals. So you only have to take a small amount, and it magnifies the product availability to the body. So I've got 4 products that I primarily use: the liposomal blend on the right, and then I have a topical gel which relieves pain and neuropathy for extended time periods of up to 12 hours, and it relieves neuropathy in particular. The topical terpene is effective in a few drops on the skin, and the crunches are a tasty 1 centimeter cookie that is an edible and can restore as a snack, or can be used in children or in pets. Actually, it can be very effective. So I want to create balance and complement health through working with the endocannabinoid system. And this is a product that works that very well. Please contact me if you have any questions, or if I can be of major assistance for you. Thank you.